Our next presenter has been on the RIE board for over 10 years, has been working with the educaring approach for what she told me she was shocked to realize almost a quarter of a century. Ruth Ann Hammond, you've outed yourself. First as a student of Magda Gerber in class with her own children, and then as a facilitator and teacher at RIE, at Pacific Oaks College and Children's School and elsewhere. Over the years, Ruth Ann has worked with more than 500 infants and toddlers and their families. Her first book, hopefully not the last, Respecting Babies, A New Look at Magda Gerber's RIE Approach, was recently published by 0 to 3 and is out there at the bookstore. But throughout it all, Ruth Ann has continued to study and learn as research in the field has progressed. So please welcome Ruth Ann Hammond.
So in the course of my studies, I've recently, in the last couple of years, had the chance to participate in study group with Dr. Alan Shore, who you saw a little clip of in Richard's presentation. And I've done that because he's been making of his work to synthesize the explosion of information that's come out about brain development in the last couple decades, and also developmental theory and attachment theory included, and psychodynamic therapies. So his work and the work of others in the field of psychoneurobiology are developing an approach that is coalescing under the phrase regulation theory. And as a person that spends hours and hours each week with infants, toddlers, and their families, there's a lot that applies directly to my work as a facilitator and educator. So today I'm just going to share with you a little bit of the ways in which my exposure to the field of neuroscience has deepened my appreciation for educaring as I received it from Magda Gerber, and to incorporate some of the new scientific knowledge into my practice with children and families. So the new science that's exploded since scientists learned to look into the brains of living, acting, breathing humans and animals, and the mapping of the human genome has completely laid to rest the whole notion of nurture versus nature. We know, of course, that the influence of the environment determines how genes are expressed, and therefore how the physical body itself adapts to the environment. A growth-enhancing environment will allow for the maximum potential of the genetic material to be expressed. A growth-inhibiting environment, which might include neglect, could include traumas, big and small, it could include actual abuse, will cause physiological adaptations that and lack of development in the brain and the nervous system that may be protective when it's happening at the time, that the child may be dissociating and not getting richly proliferating neurons in their emotional system, and that's protective at the time, but then later on it's maladaptive for later life. So the behavior of the adults that are responsible for infants directly affects how much their physiological, it reflects their physiological and psychological development. Now we're starting to learn the mechanisms of how that happens. So in the words of Dr. Alan Shore, studies in neuroscience indicate that development represents an experiential shaping of genetic potential, and that early experiences with the social environment are critical to the maturation of brain tissue. Thus, nature's potential can be realized only as it is facilitated by nurture. Through this experiential shaping, patterns of security and insecurity are actually built into a child's body with lifelong emotional consequences. This begins in utero, even as the mother's state of mind is hormonally transmitted to the fetus as to whether there's safety or threat. It's just been such an awakening for me to figure out what I've always really believed is that the mind and the body are one. And without all those antennae that we have in our sensory systems throughout our body, we wouldn't be able to keep ourselves safe, and we wouldn't be able to form relationships with that. So our bodies are the very, very best source of information about our minds and the minds of others. Information about our internal states is being continually communicated, mostly unconsciously, during our interactions with others. So they read us, and we read them. And if all's going well, we don't even notice that it's happening. That's because the right hemisphere of the brain is responsible for this primarily, and it operates at lightning speeds, non-verbally, outside of our conscious awareness, utilizing all of our senses. So for a baby, this psychobiological attunement with a caregiver is the first step in self-regulation. So what do we mean by the word self-regulation? It's a biological mechanism for survival that supports homeostasis. Homeostasis is the word that describes the way we deal with our environment by keeping our basic bodily processes within a range that allows for survival of the individual. So if it's too hot outside, we're designed to perspire, to slow our movements down, to look for shade. If we are overwhelmed by fear, we're designed to have our heart rate speed up. We're designed to seek safety, try to figure out a way to slow that down. At the same time, if we're under-aroused, we're going to go seeking more stimulation. So, for instance, if you're hanging around the house, folding laundry, doing dishes, you might want to turn on a CD player or a radio because you're feeling a little understimulated. Your arousal is too low. But at the same time, if you're doing the same activity, but you're really thinking about a problem and working through something, and what am I going to say to this person, and it doesn't occur to you to change your sensory environment by turning on the CD. You've got enough stimulation happening inside. So, that's part of that whole process. So self-regulation is the way we keep ourselves in homeostasis, and we do that either by working with other people or by working purely within ourselves. And let's see. Oh, yeah, did that. So some of the time we need a partner to help us stay in homeostasis and be well regulated, and that's called co-regulation. And some of the times we can handle it ourselves, and that's autoregulation. So finding the balance between co-regulation and autoregulation is the thing that leads to healthy self-regulation. So if we wanted to give an example of autoregulation in an adult, it's like, or self-regulation, I'm upset, something bad happened at work. Do I call my husband and, unload on him for a while and he'll calm me down? Or do I go take a dance class and just blow it off that way and calm myself down that way? And that, that's a co-regulation, autoregulation. For a baby, I'm going to suck my thumb to go to sleep, that's autoregulation. If I am going to get rocked to sleep, that's co-regulation. So one mode isn't better than the other. They're both totally necessary. It's just the balance of them that's the key, and both the child and the adult in a dyad are contributors to how that plays out. Two adults that are working with the same child are rarely going to replicate the exact same balance of autoregulation and co-regulation with that child. So my experience is oftentimes that dads are a little bit better at getting a baby to auto-regulate to sleep. Whereas there's lots of cues when the nursing mom comes into the room that the baby's going to want some really nice, yummy co-regulation to go to sleep, right? So that's how that works. So we've heard this message 2 or 3 times already today. And, an infant needs that co-regulator, that sensitive caregiver to be able to learn to manage themselves. And if the adult isn't able to do that, then we're going to see unfortunate patterns of attachment. Insecure, avoidant, insecure, anxious attachment can grow. Avoidant attachment You might see a little too much autoregulation. It's going to look like you're self-possessed to a fault. The baby is well in hand, doesn't look stressed out, but if you really took tests of their saliva, you might find a lot of cortisol in there, that underneath the surface they're actually highly stressed, but they're already faking it because they found out it's easier if I don't bother her or him. In insecure attachment of the anxious type, what you might find is a child that's a little extra clingy or demanding, controlling, and they're spending too much energy working to get the adult's attention rather than avoiding the adult's attention. So that's how that kind of plays out. But at this point, I want to just throw in an idea that, what did it say, consistently? That consistent can be misinterpreted as being the same thing as constant. And they don't need constant attention and care, right? So as Magda used to say, it's better to give 100% attention some of the time than divided attention all the time. So I know Joanna also spoke about that too. I've also started looking at culture through the lens of regulation theory, because it's clear to me that different cultures have different values about how much auto-regulation is appropriate in balance with the co-regulation. My coworkers and I sometimes have a different idea about, how much help a person should have or how much they should be able to manage it alone. So I think it's really neat to think about that. There isn't one optimal percentage. There's a right balance for a particular child in a particular family in a particular environment and culture. So you want to hear my Alan Shore quote for this page, I'll read it to you. It's, the experience of being with a regulating or dysregulating other is incorporated into an enduring interactive representation. And what that really means is that how it goes with the primary is how the child expects it to go with everybody. So I think that's what that means. Just a quick, you've seen this chart before of states of arousal. What does arousal have to do with self-regulation? As just a refresher, that we go from back and forth into these states and out of these states from, deep, deep sleep to quiet sleep. I left out deep sleep. How'd that happen anyway? Awake states, drowsy, quiet alert, active alert, crying, flooded, and the arousal states don't all have to be about unhappy too. So as the co-regulating adult, what we're doing is we're making judgment calls all the time as to how much help the baby's going to need to move gracefully through these states as we interact and respond. So how we know what the baby's feeling, and this is the thing that I think is so fascinating, or what she needs is based on our biological attunement to the baby, that their feelings are actually introjected into our bodies, and we feel their feelings. And that's how we know, that it's intuition, but it's intuition based on a lot of very subtle sensory input from the child that informs our practice. So that's that. So feelings are how we actually experience our fluctuations in arousal states. Feelings are essentially states of arousal linked to what Daniel Stern would call forms of vitality, which includes the meaning that they hold. It's not just how excited or how depressed the arousal is, but also what form does it take. So you can have active alert and be very playful and happy, or you could be active alert looking for threat. So, and you could be in a kind of a quiet alert, can be curious, or it can be cuddly, right? So it's all about feelings. So what's great to know is that misattunements are an important part of the co-regulation process. Even the very best parent or caregiver misses a huge percentage of the cues coming from the child. But that's okay, as long as they're aligned often enough to kind of be in the black. And when blatant ruptures occur, when a parent has to limit a child, the child is unhappy, the good enough caregiver is going to take the initiative to build the bridge back to harmony and get back into harmonious attunement and not pout and expect the child to woo them back. And that was a nice talk Anna Tardosh from the Pickler Institute gave to us one time a few years ago at the RIE conference. I had a parent ask me the other day, well, I've just had a horrible morning. I mean, how many ruptures and repairs are we allowed to have? And I said, well, I think if you're one repair up, you're in the black, right? Because there's not a quota. Anyway, I have a lot of quotes I could attach to that, but I won't. And we'll just go to the crux of the matter. Oh, wait. Is that it? Yes, it is. So the crux of the matter today is, how does RIE's educaring approach support an infant's capacity for self-regulation? And I would like to, just before we start this video, ask you to just, for me, notice and appreciate with me how beautifully Abby, the mother, slowly lays Sophia down on the mat. And then we're just going to watch and enjoy, okay? Oh, she noticed me. At this point, I said to her, yeah, you see me with my little camera, I'm here. Oh, can you hear me whispering that? Reaching. You're stretching to get it. How did your own internal arousal level feel during that clip? Were you thinking that maybe it was time for Sophia to get busy doing something? Do you think something more exciting should have happened sooner? I think, some people would have done something to get her going, Not in this crowd. No, not in this crowd. So what we do in a parent-infant class is we co-regulate with the adults, with the parents, to help them feel comfortable not making unnecessary interventions, allowing that to unfold in that nice, slow way to let her see what she wanted to do and how she wanted to spend her free time. And I really, did you appreciate how fully present the mother was with her? And just her little finger wave and a little smile when she would look at her, but nothing big, nothing stimulating at that point. And to me, those expressions communicate a lot, and they were certainly enough. And I just want to say, for those of you who haven't visited parent-infant classes, they don't all start off that slow. Some kids hit the ground running. So, we'll accommodate the child's style, not, it's that we don't expect that all the time. So I'm so glad that you're getting all these ideas from different perspectives, because Joanna's already talked about that. But, with the turning of Erikson upside down a little bit and our demonstrating basic trust in the infant just by letting her be, we allow her the opportunity to listen to herself, notice what she's feeling, and inside and out, and what might be interesting in the environment. All in the context of being loved for who she is, not for what she's doing or how she's performing. It's interesting that parents also have that same sense in the parent-infant classes, that they get this deep sense of relaxation, say it's the best 2 hours in their week, and that certainly was my experience as a parent in those classes. One other little piece I want to bring in is on infants' attention, because I'm always seeing research on how long babies pay attention, what their attention span is, but it's always attention to something that's outside themselves. It's how long do they look at this red square, or what do they like to look at, or this or that. But there's nothing, I don't know that there's research showing that they're paying attention to their own internal sensations and feelings, and just how does it feel to be in their skin. And I think Magda Gerber and Emmy Pickler taught us to really honor that chance for infants by slowing down our interactions with them. We give them a chance to know themselves. And until you know yourself, how can you possibly start to regulate yourself? So that slowness is a real benefit, I think. So we all have our favorite tenets of the RIE philosophy, and freedom of movement's one of mine for sure. It is also based on trust in the infant too, I think. But I was tickled to death to hear Daniel Stern at the 0 to 3 conference start off his plenary session by saying, everything begins with movement. That just was so exciting to me, because Emmy and Magda pioneered that notion, and we've carried that torch for a while, but I haven't heard it from very many other quarters, so that was really, really wonderful to hear. By honoring what Magda always called the body wisdom of the infant, we convey not only respect but trust in the child, that we figure they know more about what it's like to be inside them than we do. So, and then there's also the element of pleasure involved in freedom of movement. So we could just enjoy this for a moment. Isn't that great? 22 months, something like that. They've been in parent infant class since they were 4 or 5 months old. The little boy is Nina Hachigian's little boy, who you'll meet in a few minutes later. So, learning to control and move one's own body is an obvious early task, and learning to move appropriately between psychobiological states is the other most important task of the first few years of life, as the process of self-regulation. And how we help them do this requires a great deal of discretion on the part of the adult. Stepping in when we're needed and holding back at other times to see what the child can do without help. Magda called this process selective intervention, which Joanna talked about a little bit. It would be obviously arrogant to assume that only RIE people do selective intervention. Everybody's selective in their interventions, Of course they are. But what Magda taught was to take that moment to observe, I know Joanna already said that, and reflect before doing. And in my mind, that attitude of reflection is actually an intervention in itself, because on some level it communicates from my nervous system to the child's nervous system that everything's really okay. If a baby's in a precarious spot climbing, I may not have to say or do anything, I just turn my attention. And by turning my attention to their activity, they turn their attention to their activity too. And they might be a little more cautious rather than just fling themselves off the step or something like that. In the case of a baby that's crying, if my slowness in considering how to respond may communicate that although the baby may be feeling panicked with hunger, it must not be all that precarious a situation because my mom's not running around crazily trying to get it together to feed me, right? So from the baby's point of view, the message the child is getting is, my need is not scary to my mom. And having a scared mom is not a good thing for a baby, right? So again, the calm of the adult promotes the calm within the child, even if it means the bottle's delivered 30 or 45 seconds after. So Joanna and I are on exactly the same page there. So we have, oh, nope, I went through. Oh, I turned it upside down. That's why I went backwards. Okay, so we could see a little selective intervention in action here. Opportunities for a child to auto-regulate. So there were points at which we didn't intervene. Some people might have tried to stop them from grabbing each other's faces, but we didn't. And then obviously the mother's intervention when the baby fell and hit her head. She might have moved a little fast for some of our tastes, but the baby was really ready to be co-regulated. She was happy that her mom was there for her, so that was great. Together, they made each other feel better, the mom and baby. You know, Stephen Porges said at the attachment conference, I wish they'd stop calling it caregiving, because it's really about reciprocal interaction, and everybody's getting care in those situations. So, do I need to... Oh, no, I can't skip this part, for crying out loud. Magda was the true face of authenticity and taught us also much about the value of being honest with babies and toddlers, and she taught us that it was okay to let babies in on our true feelings. And you know what? Now I know from being with Alan Shore, they're going to know it whether we want them to or not, so we may as well be out front with it, you know. Let there be congruity between our expression and what we're really feeling inside, because if we pretend to feelings that we're not having, we confound their ability to respond appropriately, and we confuse them, so we don't want to do that. Obviously, a well self-regulated adult is the best template for helping a child become well self-regulated. And authenticity is a really great starting point. That's one of the hallmarks of what we learned from Magda. So, interesting, this other piece of the puzzle about, you know, it seems like we do tend to emphasize the calming part, the being there in serious, you know, in times of threat, discomfort, you know, as being so important to attachment. But, and I'm so glad Richard really spoke to this and set me up for this little piece that, you know, I want to say that the emphasis on the regulation of positive emotions has kind of gotten maybe not as much attention as we ought to be giving it, because it's really important. It's just as important to attachment as comfort. And I know that easing fear and providing consistent care are basic imperatives of parents and caregivers, but shared joy also builds trust, and play is the road to joy. And joy is just as essential to optimal brain development as security. Shared joy ties people to each other, and that's what attachment is about. So what's always made it so hard to talk about RIE in a short burst, in an elevator speech, is that it's a comprehensive approach to care, and takes into account the whole child and also the whole adult. And you know, it's one thing to pick it all apart, but you know, it's really important to put it all back together about what the experience is, what the lived experience is. And I think this has always been one of the hallmarks of RIE, is that we never thought of developmental domains as being separate. So hopefully now you're going to feel as confident as I am that RIE's educaring approach is supported by the latest science. Thank you, and thanks to these folks.